There we go. Does anybody have any questions from the last time? So I know a couple people are here that weren't here before. I hope you got to watch the recording. What I am working on, and I alluded to it when I sent the recording out last week. So I'm using the newer US lacrosse training materials, and the team has created some cahoots to go with the training, and they're right now they're designed to do during the training. I don't know that I'll be able to use them in our format necessarily, because I'm trying to, get through these things fairly rapidly. But I am going to create if you're not familiar with what Kahoot is, it's basically an online quiz testing. You can do games, to test knowledge and stuff. It's used a lot in education, but it also has a feature where you can basically just assign a quiz to people and take it and check knowledge. So anybody who doesn't attend a meeting will have to complete those little Kahoots. I'll send them out to get credit for the meeting. And also I'll send them to everybody, because they are a good way to see where you're at and kind of learn, make sure you're learning and understanding what we're doing. So,
hey, Greg, maybe email Brett Townsend. He has some pretty good ones. I would always have him come and like talk to my team, and they would like play a Kahoot before the season. So it was pretty effective.
Yeah, I'm going to talk to him because he probably stole mine.
That's probably true.
Probably kind of likely, but yes. Now I'll ask Brett. Yeah. So no, they're good for a couple of reasons. So we use them a lot in our training. I've made them up of. I'll get a hold of all the questions people miss on the rules test, and then we'll quiz people on those, and it's a way to kind of go through stuff that people are struggling with or having a hard time, confusing rules. I did do it a couple years ago with the coaches too, and I'd like to do it again. Some of the coaches took offense. They thought we were trying to embarrass them, but we were just trying to kind of get the word out about different rules and what we do, and build a little bit of fellowship among everybody. So let me get my screen up here. Oh, shoot. Hold on. I'll make sure I have video. There we go. Back to my presentation. So when I do the presentation, I do lose the images of you all. So if you have questions, just step in and interrupt. You should right now see the PowerPoint without my notes. Is that correct? I'm assuming it's correct. Okay, so let's first, I just want to talk about the online training real quick, or on-field training that we'll be doing. And I'm going to send something out in the next couple of days. So what it looks like we'll have right now, it'll be November 12th and maybe the 13th at Kirkwood, and you'll come for a 4-hour block. It's really 4.5. So the blocks will start at 7 and go to 11:30, and then 10 a.m. and go to 2:30. If I need to, I may add a block on Sunday from 7 a.m. To 11:30. And what I may do is ask guys who have a little bit of lacrosse background to do those that day. That's a little more advanced kids, but those are the days. When you come, your uniform should be black pants, black shoes, a black or white hat, and then we'll provide stripes, because unless you have 1-inch stripes for the football guys. We'll provide some shirts for you to wear, and then it would be good to have your own whistle, and we ask that you get like a Fox 40 Classic. No coaching P whistles or hockey whistles. So if you're going to buy a whistle or get a whistle, try to get a Fox 40 Classic, and either get the finger whistle or one that is on a lanyard. And then we'll provide flags, and if we need to use a timer or anything like that, we'll let you use ours while you're on the field. The format will basically be in the beginning, you'll kind of shadow myself or another official, basically just kind of run along the sideline, watch us, and then as we move through the day, you'll work your way in, and by the last game that you do, you'll actually kind of be on your own, and I'm hoping to get, your formal evaluation in for your certification. So if there's any issues with that, just send me an email and let me know. And again, I'll be sending something out in the next couple of days to find out everybody's availability, some kind of sign up. It will be at Kirkwood. If you do get like the 10 a.m. slot, I still suggest you get there pretty early. Parking can be horrendous. I'm not working. All right. So today we're going to talk about technical fouls. And in lacrosse, this is Rule 6. So if you have the rule book or the printout or you're using the app, you can kind of go through Rule 6. It goes over the formal rule, language of what technical fouls are. But in a nutshell, technical fouls are just basic fouls that aren't really safety related, but they're fouls that create some kind of advantage, or they disadvantage the opponent in a way against the rules. So we'll be talking about things like pushes, holds, offsides. They're pretty simple, and the penalties for them vary depending on if it's the offense committing it or the defense committing it. With technical fouls, we use this thing called TPOD, or just the principle of advantage or disadvantage. So basically, when you're watching a game, you use your judgment, the level of play, the game situation kind of determines how you call the technical fouls. There's some fouls you absolutely must call, things that involve a line that everybody can see, or offsides where you can count how many people are on one side of the line or the other and know if they're offsides. And they're also particularly around the crease because of the safety involved in protecting the goalie. But other types of fouls, sometimes you have a little bit of judgment and latitude based on the nature or the degree of the advantage or disadvantage that's created. So in technical fouls, there's we put them in 3 categories. So motion, illegal contact, and then game management. So motion fouls are basically things that happen, while the game is moving on. Things like offsides, crease violations, illegal procedure, illegal screens, warding off. And then there's also fouls that are illegal contact, things like holding, interference, pushing, where you have a illegal type of contact. And then the last kind of category we'll talk about is game management. Our job, as I spoke last week, more than anything, is managing the game. Moving it along, keeping it going, making sure that it's safe for the players, the game is fair. And it's fun, and at times there's some things, some fouls that we can use or have in our little tool belt that will help us to manage that. And they include conduct fouls, and then also stalling falls into that category. So we're going to talk first about motion fouls. All right. And the one we'll call, it's a line call, it's offsides. Not always necessary an advantage, but it has to be called because of a line violation. So, basically, when we say it's not always an advantage, you could have offsides where the player who's offsides may not be creating an advantage, but because it involved the center line and a guy over the center line, a player over the center line, everybody sees it. You know, it's obvious. So you pretty much have to call every offsides. And with offsides, to be offsides, you have to have 7 players in the offensive half of the field, or 8 in the defensive half. So, you know, you normally should have 6 offensive players and 7 defensive players, 6 players plus the goalie. So if you have more than either of those, you're going to have offsides. So when we talk about counting offsides, and just a note, don't, in the beginning of officiating, don't sweat offsides. It is very difficult sometimes to call offsides. You really have to start knowing what you're looking for. And when we get on the field, we'll talk a little bit more about it, quite a bit. But you know, it's a difficult thing. So the trail, okay, so the person following play up the field is the person counting offsides. And basically what they're looking for is, first, you're going to count the offensive team. You're looking when that 7th player, you know, goes over the line or ends up in the zone. If they're in the sub box, they're not counted on either side of the field. So you have to watch for that. And then, you know, when they're moving, you know, you're kind of counting as they're moving over. When they're settled, you can just physically count them. All right, so let's take a quick look here at an offsides play. All right, so in this video, the Navy blue team is in the process of clearing the ball. So he comes around, and from here, so if you count them, we now have 7 offensive players, and you'll see it in just a second. Watch it one more time. How do I get the little thing to come back up? There we go. All right, so you just kind of follow. If you look, these little blue dots will come into shape. So when we get to the end of the video, as you can see, if you count the dark blue players, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. All right. And when we count offsides, you know, you count a couple times before you call it. Make sure you have it. Like I said, we tend to call, we want to count the offense first, because if the offense is offsides and they score, now you know, you have to wave a goal off, and that's never a great thing. And also sometimes it gets confusing right after the goal, and you think you have offsides, but you didn't, or you think you think you did, but you did. But it's hard to go back, you know, later if you didn't have it before the goal was scored. With the defense, so let's watch the defense go offsides. Okay, so if you notice, the riding attackman number 10 goes over. All right. And we already know, it doesn't show it, but as he goes over, there were already 6 players forward. You have to be careful with this example, because just because that player went over the line doesn't necessarily constitute that they were offsides. You would already have to know that there were 6 other defenders down here, and then he went over. So when you see that defender or that attackman do that and go over, before you throw your flag, you always want to count and make sure that they did truly have 6 players there when he went over. You know, sometimes that happens and they've got it, they're subbing, or there's a guy subbing from behind them. So you have to really watch for that. Okay. And again, offsides is in your time as an official will be one of the last things that you get, that you're able to really master and get on a regular basis. So the penalty for offsides, if it's on the offense, it's just going to be a turnover. Okay, so any of these technical fouls, if the offense commits the foul, it's basically just a turnover. Or if the ball is loose when it happens, the ball is awarded to the team that did not commit the violation or the foul. If it's on the defense, it's going to be a flag, a penalty, and they're going to serve a 30-second penalty for that foul. And next week we'll go over how we manage those fouls and how we enforce them. Okay, so crease violations. Okay, line call. It may not always be an advantage again, but because of the nature of the foul being a line and also the just the potential for safety, we have to call it. Okay. So you must, you have to call these crease violations. So anytime an offensive player steps on the line of the crease or inside the crease, okay, you're gonna call a crease violation. Okay. And he can, so an offensive player can put his stick into the crease as long as no other body part is in there and as long as he doesn't make contact with the goalie's cross. But once he falls in, a hand hits, a knee hits, a foot hits, it's going to be a violation, and you have to call it. When you make this call, you want to be very big and animated because often other people aren't going to always see it. All right. So and a lot of times by the time you blow your whistle and stop play, the ball will be in the net. So when we get on the field, I'll show you, we just want to make a really big call. We want to come right into the point of the foul, point at the crease line and say crease, and then we'll get the restart going. It also says here you can use a play on if no goal is scored. And we'll talk more about play ons when we talk about penalty enforcement, but a play on is simply your way of telling everybody, okay, I saw a foul, I saw the crease violation, I saw an offsides. This is when a ball is loose. And you're going to see if, the team that didn't commit the foul picks up the ball with an advantage and is able to continue. Okay, so that's a play on. It's just a way of preserving or giving the team that's going to be awarded the ball a little bit more of an advantage. All right. Illegal procedure. And this is the catch-all call. One of my mentors told me years ago, if you blow your whistle and you don't know what to call illegal procedure. Okay. That's kind of a joke, but it's a little bit true also. It's not really a call, it's a category of call. So you're going to explain what actually happened. And when you have illegal procedure, you want to get play started, and then often you'll have to maybe one of you or your partner will have to go back and explain to the coach what happened, but you're not going to take a lot of time to do that. You're not going to delay your restart, but you may have to explain what it was. So some of the actual calls that fall into this category are delay a time. All right. Or delay a game. So, we want to keep the game moving. We want to keep the game going. But there are some things that the player, the team needs to do or also be called for delay of game. So, one of them is after a goal is scored and you're going to have a face-off, they have up to 20 seconds to be ready to face off. And if they're not ready within that 20 seconds, you're going to call delay a game. If a player delays coming in back in bounds, that could be delay a game. The big area that we're calling delay a game right now has to do with restarts and giving an offensive player 5 yards when you have a restart. So for those of you who know lacrosse, you'll understand what I'm saying. It might take a little while to understand for you guys who are learning the game. Whenever we have a restart in the middle of the field, we do a fairly quick restart. So basically, once the player who's entitled to the ball picks up the ball, you're supposed to blow your whistle and restart, even if the defensive player is within 5 yards of that player. And basically, at that point, it's on the defensive player to give 5 yards before he actually makes a play, stick checks or body checks that player. And if he does make that play, or he gets in the direct path of the player in the goal before yielding 5 yards, that would be a delay of game, and that would be a flag and a 30-second penalty. Yeah. So those are the other delay is when a team, when you have a loose ball foul or something, or a foul on the offense, and the team that committed the foul moves the ball, or does not just drop the ball, but rolls it away from the player, so he has to go get it before he's entitled to his restart. That would be a delay of game. And then a couple, those are the main delay games. Okay. And, sometimes with delay a game, you've got to kind of set your bar early. It's one of those kind of things, if you allow teams to really take their time on face-offs, or, you're kind of loose on that 5-yard restart thing, you're kind of stuck with that for the rest of the day. So you need to kind of set your bar as to how you're going to do it. Call those kind of things early, and just take that away. If you a lot of those kind of delay game things, if you ignore or you give a little bit too much latitude, it comes back to bite you. Another illegal procedure is mouthpiece. Every player is required to wear a mouthpiece. It's a very difficult thing because a lot of the players, don't, they fall out. You also spend a lot of time looking to see if they have a mouthpiece in and not watching play. So that's a good thing to really talk about with the crew and decide how you're going to handle mouthpiece violations. Generally, we give a warning to get the mouthpiece in, and then you find an offensive player with the ball or a loose ball, and you call it, and you take the ball away. If you continue to have issues with it and it's going to be a problem, then you may end up throwing a flag and putting a guy in. But it's kind of going to be up to you and the crew is how deep you're going to get into mouthpieces. Another illegal procedure that's not written on here. Teams are only allowed to have 4 long poles or 6-foot defender sticks on the field at any time. If they have more, that's an illegal procedure. Having too many men on the field, too many players, even if they're not offsides, that's an example of illegal procedure. Also, back to the restarts. When you have a restart in the middle of the field, any restart, you can't have an offensive player within 5 yards of the player who's going to actually have the ball for the restart. You shouldn't ever call that, because you shouldn't do the restart when they're within 5 yards. But if somehow it happens and they sneak in, that would be an immediate turnover. And then a couple others, playing without required equipment. And usually it's a stick. So you're required whenever you're participating in play to have all your equipment. And a lot of times, somehow during play or on a loose ball, a stick gets checked out of a guy's hands. If he participates in play, which basically means makes contact with any player without the stick, and it's going to usually be when the ball's on the ground, you're just going to blow your whistle, call procedure, and give the ball to the other team. We'll talk a little bit later. There's some nuances with that, with like gloves and things like that. So for example, here you see an attackman, or an offensive player carrying the ball. If he was to lose his glove or lose his shoe in possession of the ball, you're just going to stop play and let them get their equipment back on and go. If the defensive player was to have that happen, you're going to allow him to get out of the way, okay, and not necessarily call a foul for playing without equipment. But if without that equipment, he goes to check the player or continues to play the player, then you're going to have a penalty because it's a safety thing. Another illegal procedure is playing from out of bounds. And you'll learn this is a nice thing. So when two guys are battling especially for a ground ball near a line, you're just kind of hoping, if one of those players playing for that ball steps on the line while they're playing, trying to get the ground ball or trying to check the player, that's going to be playing from out of bounds. And then the other illegal procedure is over and back. So in the play of the game, and we'll talk in mechanics a little bit more, when a team gets possession of the ball, they have a certain amount of time to get the ball into the box or get it in their offensive area. And once it's in that offensive area, the ball cannot go back over the midfield line. Last touched by that team. And if it is, that's over and back. And it's simply a turnover. Any questions on all that? I know that's a lot.
There is a time where it happened a couple times last year when I did games, especially when the big kids play. The shot that hits the crossbar and the ball will actually spring over and back. That's not over and back though. It's just a shot.
Yeah, good point, Mark. Yeah, if there's a shot and that's still on the impetus of the shot, it goes back over the midfield line, then it is not over and back.
Mm-hmm.
And generally, and we'll talk in mechanics when that happens. Generally, you're kind of just yelling, "It's still a shot, because you're trying to kind of override everybody who's screaming over and back because they don't know the rules. So, but that's a good point. All right, illegal screens. Okay, these are often called moving pick. In the rules, though, they're called an illegal screen. So when and much like basketball, when an offensive player wants to set a screen, and we're seeing more and more of this kind of play in the game, whole lot more picks and double picks. So when they stand up, they can't have their stick or anything in their body more than shoulder width. So their feet have to be under them, shoulder width. Their stick has to be inside the frame of their body. Okay, everything has to be in there. And their feet have to be set. If they make contact with the defensive player, and those things aren't met, it's going to be an illegal screen. But there has to be contact with the defensive player, and you have to judge that contact is caused by the offensive player. Okay, if there's no contact, there's no foul. And also if, we'll talk later, but a little more advanced, if they're holding the stick a little bit out, but the defensive player makes contact right with the chest, we're usually not going to call that. We might give a little warning to the player, but we're not going to call that. And really the big things are a guy, he sets the pick and then he kind of tries to lean a hip or give a little hip check to the defender, not being set before contact, so getting there too late. And that means their feet, and then also standing in a wide stance. And again, if their stance is too wide and the defender trips over their foot or trips over their leg, then you're going to have it. If they're standing too wide and the defensive player hits center mass, you're not necessarily going to call that an illegal screen. So let's look at this and we'll get an idea of it. What? Very subtle, but he turned. kind of leaned into the game. So that's an illegal screen. The other thing, and I'm not sure if we're going to talk, let me see. Yeah, we'll get into interference in a minute. So those are all of the kind of motion, things that happen in the motion of the game, types of technical fouls. Now, the next thing is the illegal contact. So remember, lacrosse, one of the beauties of lacrosse is the physicality that you have in the game, and pushing and holding in certain cases are legal. Okay, so you can push or body check a player from the front or the side, as long as it's from the waist up, to the top of the shoulders. Okay, that is considered to be legal. Okay, you can, with your hands, you can hold a player, okay, and restrict his movement, as long as you're not using the stick, either in the middle or on the ends, to restrict that movement. You're allowed to check, a player's stick, physically hit it and hold it with your stick, as long as you're not holding the ball and the stick back to the player's body. So there is legal holding and legal pushing. So when we say we call a penalty for holding or for pushing, that's for holding or pushing that is not legal, usually from the back. And it causes, it gives your team an advantage or creates a disadvantage for the other team. So a couple things with holding. So with possession, it's a simple advantage, disadvantage. Okay, sometimes with holding, you might have a hold. So for example, the picture here is a good picture of a hold. But if that player, the offensive player, if he's not trying to get to the goal, let's say he's trying to get away from the goal a little bit, and he's moving and he's able to roll out of that hold, and the defender lets it up, in a higher level game, you might let that go. But if that hold restricts him or disrupts his play, in your judgment, then you could call the hold. So that's what it means. Sometimes a no call is okay to keep the flow going. When you see holds on loose balls, that's a good opportunity to get the ball off the ground. So it's a way to control the game. And when we get on the field, you'll hear me say several times, generally when the ball is on the ground for any long period of time, that's a bad thing, and it leads to other bad things. So when you see a hold or even a push that's significant enough to cause an advantage or disadvantage, you're going to make that call. The level of play matters in any of these type of fouls, particularly the holding. So can the player being held play through it with no advantage lost? So kind of to my point, if they're going to the goal and it holds them up from getting to the goal, or it holds him and restricts him from being able to pass the ball, you're probably going to make that call. If it's kind of in the open field and it gets held a little bit and runs through it, but it doesn't stop a fast break or it doesn't create a turnover or anything like that, you are going to probably pass on that. So that's kind of holding. You also have kind of a concept in lacrosse of equal pressure. So, if particularly there's been a focus lately on what's kind of called a cross check hold, and I don't have a video of it, but the player has the center of his stick and he's kind of, the attackman's coming into it. Okay, as long as his hands are like this and they're exerting equal pressure. So the offensive player is pushing into that stick and you're pushing back and you're not redirecting them, you're not going to call that a hold. If you start redirecting the player with your stick, you're going to get called for a hold. If it's not equal pressure and you have your hands like that and you drive it into him, that's going to be a cross check. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. Okay.
In this clip, White has the ball and he is dodging to the goal when he is held by the red long stick defender around the neck.
So this is a
This is
great
a common
example.
hold
This is
seen
a
in
hold you
lacrosse
have to
games,
call.
and the official correctly throws his flag. The red defender should be assessed a penalty of 30 seconds for this technical foul.
Okay, so you see how he's, I mean, he's going to the
Here,
goal.
White has the ball
He's
behind
gonna
the
go to a
goal, and he
goal by
passes to
himself.
his teammate, who is held around the neck by the red defender. The red defender's stick comes up and around the white player's neck and disadvantages him from finishing his shot. This is correctly flagged by the on-field officials, and the red defender should serve a 30-second penalty.
Okay, so those are two really good examples of holds you want to call. And in especially in the second example, because it involved the neck, you don't want to pass on that. All right, pushing. Very similar to holding. All right. You're looking for advantage, disadvantage. Sometimes a no call is okay to keep the game moving. Same concept with getting the ball off the ground. The level of play does matter. Okay. And remember, as I mentioned, front or side is legal. And within 5 yards of a loose ball, front or side is legal. So, what you're looking for is did that push cause the player to lose the ball, or did that push change his angle towards the goal enough that it took away, his opportunity to take a shot or make a feed? Did he kind of give him a little push and he was already headed behind the goal and he just kept on going behind the goal? It's kind of, no harm, no foul. On a loose ball, equal pressure really matters. If a guy is kind of boxing out on the loose ball and the other guy's trying to get past him, if there's some pushing going on, that's fine. Once that equal pressure is over and that player ends up on the ground, or he ends up, stepping over the ball because of the push, well, then you're going to have a penalty for pushing. Okay. And again, if it's a loose ball, it's just going to be awarding possession. You don't usually see pushing on the offense. That's going to fly more in the case of moving screens or interference. But when it is on the defense and there's possession, you are going to throw your flag, and that's going to be a 30-second penalty. So let's look at some pushes. And this is a really good example, because I want you to kind of watch. This is a good fight for a ground ball. It's kind of something as a fan, you want to see. This is the physical of the game. You had a great check. You had a little bit of banging around and pushing. But in the end, that guy picks up the ball. And that push, he probably added a little bit to it, but the push clearly caused him to not be able to pick up that ball. So the ball's loose. Okay. And then he's pushed. You're going to have to decide if you're going to call that with possession or a loose ball foul. Being that he ended out of bounds and faced first in the track, and he probably had the ball for a second, I'm probably gonna throw a flag on that, but that would be kind of to my judgment. So that's a good example of a push for us. Any questions on pushes? So again, in all this, advantage, disadvantage really matters. All right, so interference, there's a couple different categories of interference. And we're going to talk here about non-goalkeeper interference. And it's kind of a catch-all. So you can't interfere with the free movement of a player, particularly off ball, And when we say off ball, more than 5 yards from where the ball is, whether it's with possession or whether it's a loose ball. And when it happens offensively, it's a turnover. A lot of times these are going to be off ball screens, things like that. And then if it's on the defense, it's going to be a flag down. And those are going to be things, like pushing and shoving off ball that cause an offensive player to lose his footing, maybe not be able to make a cut, maybe not be able to set a pick. Often you'll see in the crease area, so when they're right in the middle in front of the goal, the defender, you teach your defenders to find your player and kind of hold your stick there. And a lot of times the defender will take an advantage and give him a little pop to the stick. If that stick, if that's off ball, the guy doesn't have possession, or it's not a loose ball, or it's a loose ball and it's more than 5 yards, and that stick ends up on the ground, he's been disadvantaged. That's going to be an interference. The same with pushes and shoves. If the two guys are banging around in front of the crease, one of them ends up on the ground or one of them ends up in the crease, you're going to have interference. So let's look at a couple here. Okay, so watch what happens here in the middle. That's kind of a classic in the middle interference like I was talking about. So he gave a little push. It was way off the ball and he ended up losing his stick. Clearly a disadvantage to the team. All right. And that appropriately was flagged. Okay, here's another example. So way off ball, a little overzealous. And comes up and gives him a little push into the crease. Now, if that's early, maybe that's a little bit early in the game, let's say, and he doesn't end up in the crease, you might give him a warning, depending on what happened. But there, the kid clearly goes in the crease, so now you have to decide, am I calling him on the crease or am I going to call, the interference? And you're stuck with the interference, absolutely. Because he ended up in the crease. Does that make sense? So those are kind of the big, the most common technical fouls you're going to see: the pushes, the holds, the interference. The pushes and the holds, generally show up and they're pretty easy to tell. The interference is something sometimes, particularly in front of the goal, you try to talk the players out of it. You have two players banging into each other. You look up when you're the off ball official and you see two guys shoving. You don't really know who it was at first. You might yell, hey, keep it clean on the crease, knock it off. Don't ever call out one player. Just, both of you stop. If they don't, you find somebody, you're going to call that foul and you're going to go with it. And hopefully, that's going to help you manage the game and it's going to stop happening. All right. So now game management fouls. Like I said, sometimes there's a couple different things that we have to do to keep the game moving, and they're game management fouls. The first one is going to be this conduct foul. Okay. And it's a way to get coaches under control and sometimes players, but mostly you're going to call conduct fouls on coaches. It's a kind of a way, to tell the coach you've had enough without calling an unsportsmanlike and a bigger penalty. And hopefully the coaching staff, whoever it is, gets the message and, you move on and it ends. We use a thing kind of called the ladder when it comes to dealing with coach and player discipline, and particularly with coaches. The beginning of that ladder are warnings. Coach, it's enough. We've heard you. You need to knock it off. You need to stop. Particularly if he continues to implore long after a call was made or something he disagreed with happens, hopefully you can get a warning. If that warning doesn't work and that coach continues, is becoming more animated, without, using bad language or without, insulting your integrity or your wife or anything like that, we're going to call a conduct foul, and we're going to hope that either the ball is loose or his team has the ball and we just take it away. And that often sets the tone. It's okay. I get it, because like in any game, possession is everything, right? You can't in most sports, you can't score if you don't have the ball. So if you take the ball away, you've now taken away their opportunity to score. And usually that will send a message. Okay. We don't use conduct fouls. We don't use any of our fouls on fans. And we'll talk more about that probably in our post game, our fourth class. There's other ways of dealing with fans and non-players, parents, things like that. But we don't call fouls. We don't call fouls on the team based on what the fans are doing. And like I said, this is generally used as a first level before we go to an unsportsmanlike conduct foul, which means, they serve 1 minute in the box, they're man down for a minute, and particularly on unsportsmanlike, most unsportsmanlikes are what we call locked in or full-time penalties, which means they can't be released by a goal. They're only released when the time expires. So, on an unsportsmanlike, often a team will, they could be man down and give up, multiple goals. When you do use conduct fouls, you have to be consistent with both teams. So, if this coach in the blue wouldn't stop about a push he thought you shouldn't call, and you let him go for, 20 seconds before you finally call the conduct foul. If you have a problem down here later with this coach, you got to give them the same deference and the same time. You need to be consistent. You can't go right to it unsportsmanlike on one team if in the same situation you gave a conduct foul to the other team. The other thing about conduct fouls, if they use language, if they won't get off the field, if they dead out, tell you, hey, you're cheating the kids, you're a cheater, in any way, question your integrity and not just a judgment call, skip the conduct foul and go right to the unsportsmanlike. All right. Now stalling, and here's we still have a lot of we've taken a lot of stalling out of the college game because we have a shot clock. In high school and in a lot of the youth stuff we do, you don't have a shot clock, so you call stalling. In high school here in Delaware, and in a lot of tournaments we do, we are required to put in a stalling warning in the last 2 minutes of the game with 4 goals or less. Okay. And when we call stalling, the team with possession who's winning has to get the ball into the offensive box and keep it there. And if the ball comes out of the box, because of something that the team with possession did or didn't do, then they're going to lose possession. If the ball comes out of the box because it was on the ground and touched by the defense, you're not going to call it. At other times, it's strictly a subjective call. Okay. And it's something as a newer official, you would always defer to your crew chief or your more senior officials to make these calls and talk about what you're going to do. But basically, when a team is obviously in possession of the ball and not attacking the goal, so either they're taking the ball behind and just kind of keeping it there, passing it between 2 players, They're just kind of throwing it around the outside perimeter of the defense. They are particularly outside the perimeter and outside the offensive box, or something like that. If they have it in the box and the defensive is not playing them above goal line extended, above the line where the goal is, that can't be stalling. The defense would have to be at least making an effort to play them to get stalling. And then when you have stalling, you do always want to consider the score differential. Certainly not a healthy thing to do to call stalling on a team that is down by a lot of goals in the second half. And literally they're just trying not to give up more goals. Why are you going to poke the bear in that one? And then the other thing you have to consider with stalling is, is the team in a zone or are they playing man to man? Often a zone, the defensive team is purposely sucking themselves in as close to the goals to make it harder for the other team to score. And, the team needs to move the ball around or do some stuff to try and pull them out of their zone a little bit. And if they don't come out and play the ball, or if the offensive team isn't attacking that zone, you don't want to call stalling. If they're just attempting to pull them out of their zone, you don't want to really call stalling. If they're trying to get in, inside, you don't call it. Okay. So that's stalling. So those are, that's technical fouls. So were there any questions about the technical fouls? Let me call up the other one. So either everybody's fallen asleep. I've done a great job of explaining this and everybody knows what's going on, or I've done a terrible job and everybody's just too confused and doesn't know how to word the question.
You're doing a great job, Greg.
Try.
Yep. Greg, you ought to see the football course, man, compared to yours.
I'm a firm, you can only learn so much of this in the classroom, to be honest with you.
Amen.
A lot of it is just and Mark is the perfect example. Getting out there, watching, learning, doing. I'm a big believer in that. I don't know why I didn't say this before. All right, there we go. All right, so now we're going to move on to personal fouls, and this is Rule 5. So, as I mentioned yesterday, the rule book is pretty straightforward. Rules 1, 2, and 3 are just kind of very, they're the kind of the minutia of the game, how big the field is, what type of equipment players wear, what the responsibilities of the officials, the coaches, timekeepers, things like that are. And all that. Rule 4, which we covered last week, is how the game is played. Rules 5 and 6 are the fouls. So we just covered Rule 6, which is technical fouls. Now we're going to cover Rule 5, which is personal fouls. All right. And personal fouls are the big, for the most part, they're safety fouls. So they're fouls that occur that create unsafe conditions. And we'll go over what all of them are. And they are also severe violations of the rules of sportsmanship. So we'll go over all these, but you can kind of see we have a cross check. This is probably going to be a slash. Pretty much can tell that. That's Kevin Walker there in the right here trying to carry the ball, and he's so good. This guy's just going to bury him in men's league. This is
Come on now, Greg.
This is well, you're the one drawing the foul. So I could have gone the other way with it. So this is clearly an illegal body check and a target to the head. And this is going to be another slash or, something really bad. So what does the rule book say? So like I said, personal fouls are those of a serious nature. Illegal body checking, slashing, cross-checking, tripping, unnecessary roughness, unsportsmanlike conduct, and checks involving the neck or head. And then also the use of illegal cross or illegal equipment. Okay, so there's 3 types of personal fouls. Just like, we talked about the different types of technical fouls. Okay, illegal contact, illegal equipment, and illegal contact or illegal conduct. Okay, and the 3 circles kind of mix, but for the most part, they're going to fall into one of these classifications. And the way a lot of officials will kind of classify this is your technical fouls are your misdemeanors, right? And these are your felonies. All right, these are big, they're unsafe, they're dangerous. And if they're not, if they're not called, it's going to lead to bigger problems. Technical fouls, you can manage the game by if you call them or not. But these, if you just allow guys to, swing sticks and you allow a lot of late hits and things like that, it just gets worse and worse. And how you handle the areas determine the control you have of the game, the safety of the game, and your credibility as a crew. So let's take a deeper dive. All right. So we already mentioned that in the other thing, what the personal fouls were. All right. So let's start first with cross-checking. So we're talking about the part of the stick that's between the hands. Okay. If you're hitting them with the area between your hands, okay, and a couple different ways it happens. You thrust out into the player's body, okay, or even into their stick, which forces their stick into their head. So a thrusting motion, or a lot of times you'll see cross checks where a player's running up and a defensive player is just holding his hands straight out and a player runs into it. That's a cross check. Okay. If the player has it in like this and a player runs in, it's not. And like we said with that cross check hold, if they're not thrusting, it's not always going to be a cross check. So you're looking for separation and a definitive thrusting motion. Okay, so let's see. You can definitely see that one coming. 21's kind of headhunting there. And clearly hits the player with the stick, with the center of the stick, with both probably a thrusting and a motion where he's holding it. Let's look at it one more time if we can. We don't need more videos. Now, one thing I do want to mention about this, and this is little referee point. Watch the referee after he throws the flag. So you just had a huge cross check, the potential for a kid to have an arm broken, a shoulder separated, something like that. The flag. Does anybody have a problem with his action after he threw the flag? He turned his back. Okay. Whenever you have a big hit like that, don't turn your back. Okay. Get them separated. That's when emotions are high. By throwing the flag, he hits his whistle, get into the middle, let them know you're there, be big, have them separate. Okay. And then deal with the foul. Okay. turning your back is never going to be a good thing. Okay. Just a pro tip, voice of experience. All right. So illegal body check. Okay. You can't check a player more than 5 yards from a loose ball. Okay. If you do, that is an illegal body check. Okay. Particularly if it's, hard or vicious. If it just pushes him around a little bit, you're going to have interference. But if it's hard, hard enough to drop him on the ground or something like that, that's going to be an illegal body check. More than 5 yards from the ball, from the rear below the waist. And again, this is with extra exertion, more than just, a pushing motion. Okay. Hitting a player on the ground. So the player, when you hit him, he's got to have, he can't have more than his feet on the ground. So if he's got a knee down, he's laying on the ground. They actually clarified it in the rule book this year, that, basically the guy's laying on the ground and you just come in and plow into him, that's going to be an illegal body check. It's actually going to be targeting because he's defenseless. Okay. Just a regular illegal body check can still just be a 1 minute foul. So any of these personal fouls, you're going to have the latitude of going from 1 to 3 minutes. Your basic illegal body check that met any of these criteria here. Okay. You're generally, it's going to be a 1 minute penalty. All right. Now, in the illegal body checks is also checks that involve the neck or the head. So, and this is, in every sport now, this is a huge emphasis. As science gets better and our ability to examine, the human body gets better, we're seeing all kinds of problems from people who have had, even single concussions or single, heavy head trauma. So we're working very hard to get this out of the game, and it definitely falls on us. So anything that involves the neck or the head. So a targeting, which is defined as basically in high school rules, a defenseless player. So actually headhunting, going high on purpose. It could be hitting a player with his back turned, his head down, looking for a loose ball. Anything like that is going to automatically be a 2 or 3 minute non-releasable penalty. Anything that starts legal and follows through and makes contact with the head or the neck is going to be 2 or 3 minutes. Spearing, so using your head, hitting the guy with the crown of your helmet, and often that's going to be on the offense. That's a check involving the neck or a head. That's one of the more dangerous ones. And then uncontrolled slash. So if a guy's making a legitimate effort to check the ball and he hits the guy in the head, that's going to be 1 minute. But if he's not making that legitimate effort and he hits the guy in the head, you really need to get involved and go 2 to 3 minutes on that one. Basically at some point it becomes, a crime. It's assault. And then also any cross-checking to the head. So we're looking for those. Those are going to go 2 to 3 minutes automatically. And generally, I think we're to the point, if we're going to go to 3 minutes, we're probably going to eject that player at this point. We need to get, if they're still around in the game, we need to get them out. So this will be an example of one. So this one, I'm probably going to talk to my crew. That's probably going to end up being 2 minutes, but we are going to talk about, should this player be ejected? We might look at his prior history in that game. He comes in high and he hits him in the head. It's a terrible foul, but to some degree, I think, he did a little bit, try to hold up, but we're going to definitely get together and talk about, what we had on that foul. And just the fact that he turned around as Mr. Nice Guy and let him up shouldn't impact that, but it was good sportsmanship. All right, so defenseless player, and I just talked about this a little bit in seeing if that was number 22. Everybody's on Cross Ferreira, but it's not, it's 24. So we just talked about defenseless players. So hitting a guy from the blind side without possession. So basically just looking for a guy and lighting him up. He can't see it coming. Includes things like a buddy pass. So the guy, you turn to catch the ball, you catch it and you turn, and the guy just lays you out. That's a defenseless player. A guy scooping a ground ball, he's got his head down, scooping the ground ball, and you come up and just, take him out. That's 100% going to be, a targeting or defenseless player foul. They did add in this year the face-off player. So, the face-off player is in a crouched position to get a ball, and somebody comes along and body checks him. That's going to be a defenseless player. Okay, and again, those are 2 to 3 minutes. They're full-time penalties. You can't, if it involves the head in any way, there's no way that you can bring this down to a 1 minute penalty. And it doesn't have to be a hit to the head. If it's a blindside hit, even if he hits him, you'll see it sometimes. The guy's down for a ground ball and the guy just comes up and lifts him off the air or lifts him off the ground into the air. That's still a defenseless player hit, even though it didn't involve the head. They're very dangerous penalties. So I did want to go back for a second just to the illegal body checks. One note on an illegal body check. So if a player is about to be body checked, okay, and turns his back, like he's about to be legally checked from the front, but he turns and that check still follows through and gets him in the back, you can consider that a legal check still, as long as they were engaged in the act of checking. And that's going to be your judgment. And you just want to make sure you're consistent with that. So if they turn, and it doesn't involve the head or neck, then we're gonna probably err on the side of, he turned, and you just want to be consistent with that. All right. So here's a defenseless player.
Finally cleared out by Oberg. Finds a teammate down towards the offensive zone, and it's scooped up by Feldhage, but then taken away by the Panthers. A host of 4 Panthers getting there to him. Big, stiff elbow to the face tight check. And that's going to draw a quick penalty.
Here's another.
Blitzing right off the bench was Neil Molitor. And just a blind side
It's good to see a couple of these views. All right. In the first view,
by the Panthers, a host
this guy
of 4
who finally
Panthers
gets the
getting
ground
there
ball,
to
he
him.
has
Big,
no
stiff
chance
elbow to
to see
the
that guy
face
coming
tight
in.
check. And that's going to draw a
Running
quick penalty.
out of the box at full speed.
Blitzing right off the
You
bench.
just see what it does to his
Was
head.
Neil
his neck,
Molitor,
all
and
that.
just a blindside hit.
And that one again,
Hershey.
we're gonna get together.
Contact
as
to
a
the
crew.
head.
We're gonna all talk before we assess any penalty. We're gonna talk about what we had and what we saw, and then we're gonna decide.
Cleared out by Oberg.
Is that gonna be 2, 3, ejection, and you're starting to see more and more ejections on those big hits because we have to get them out of the game. So targeting, any blindside hit with or without possession, head down on a loose ball. And if it's targeting, so this is directly to the head, it's going to be a 3-minute non-releasable foul. And kind of like I said, we're most likely, if we get to that point that we're going to use the word targeting and we're going to use the word head, we're gonna most likely have a long talk about if we're going to eject that player or not. And a lot of times these are angry fouls. It's not anywhere within the context of the play of the game. It's not just the player, the player was just playing a little too hard. There's a big difference between a guy playing too hard and a guy going out there and trying to do bodily harm. And those are the ones we're trying to take out. So here's one. So he came from behind and, no way to see him, got him high, and chances are that kid who got that hit from behind like that just clipped him. He's probably not coming back in that game. And he's probably going to miss multiple games. So certainly, in that case, I think an ejection would be warranted. And more and more we'll talk about, we'll talk about this and we spend a lot of time on it because it's a big part of the game. Lacrosse is a growing sport. One of the things that is attracting people to it is it's not a collision sport. It's not designed to be a collision sport. It's a skill sport that allows, contact and physicality, and we need to keep it at that and not turn it into a collision sport. The equipment these players wear, the helmets, the shoulder pads, they're not like football stuff that's designed to absorb all of those kind of impacts and be used for that purpose. All right, slashing. And this one, I like this picture because this is the one where as a referee, pretty much the flag's probably already going to be in the air. All right, so slashing is swinging with viciousness or reckless abandon. So that's part of the equation. Okay. Striking an opponent in the head, the back, or the leg. And we're not going to do the pool noodle. Look at this for a minute and we'll talk. He ended up with 2. Okay, so let's go back and watch it one more time here. Guy was just taking swings. No real legitimate attempt to create a turnover. And the other thing I do want you to notice, I talked to you about the referee and the other one turning his back. Let's look at what these two got. Flag. And it stops, and that was a 3-person crew, but they came in, restored order, and then they're going to deal with what the penalties are. Couple things about slashing. So in that case, the guy got no stick, period. You can call a slash even if they got stick. If in your opinion it was vicious and with reckless abandon, it can still be a slash. All right. And that's a way, you work to kind of prevent those. We'll go by the trolling attackman. Flag down. So let's go back and look at that again. And this is one, this is when we get into mechanics next week. When you have clears, it's the hustle on the clears. He goes across the line at number 5. Just, let's go. It's no piece of the stick, the glove, or anything like that. So, yes, you're allowed to, stick check a guy in the stick and in the gloves. But in that case, first of all, he was a step behind and he used up 40 inches of his stick, to be able to get a good whack right on his back. And it was hard. So we're definitely not going to let that one go. And we want to catch that one quick. And there's a judgment thing to calling the slashes. I'll be honest, sometimes you'll see, you'll see that, but they kind of let go at the end and just give them a tap on the hip. That one you may let go depending on the game, but when they just turn around and swing one-handed with no regard for that player, you got to call that because it'll just keep getting worse and worse and worse. So if you have that, you call it early, let everybody know that's where your bar is and you'll be okay. All right. So tripping.
Hey, Greg, real quick, can you explain the brush? You know, like sometimes like a coach, they'll want to slash, but then it's like really a brush. You know what I
Right.
mean?
So, there's nothing in the rule book that says about a brush, but you're dealing with, athletes who are moving around and running around. A player goes to get a stick check in that, maybe he's checking up and he gets good stick and then he rattles the cage a little bit, totally unintentional. As long as you're consistent with that, that's going to be a brush. If you're playing defense with a long pole and the player goes, he dodges into you and kind of hits your stick and there's no force to it, that's going to be a brush. I learned not to, some guys will do this. So I had a brush. I learned not to do that. If the coach asks me, I say, Coach, I didn't have a slash. If later they want to ask me what I meant, I'll go, Coach, it was in the act of checking. He happened to hit his head. The player was not put in danger. It wasn't, and use the rules from the rule book. It wasn't vicious. It wasn't malicious. It was an effort to get the ball out, and I didn't have a slash. Does that answer it?
Yes.
Yeah. And the big thing too, and we'll talk when we get on the field, a lot of it's crew consistency. If in the first half, I let a bunch of stuff go and consider them brushes, but on the other side, my partner's calling all those slashes. Well, now we're going to have a problem, right? The coach is going to be asking, well, what the hell? So you have to work with your crew to set that bar. And, unfortunately, sometimes early in the game, your partner will be a little bit flag happy and call what most people would consider brushes slashes. Well, that's got to be a slash for the rest of that game. You got to live with that. And that's part of, learning to work as a crew. And it's also part of learning to officiate, but consistency with it is everything. All right. So tripping, obstructing below the waist with positive primary action. And that's right out of the rule book. Okay. So it's not, two guys getting their feet necessarily tangled. It's not a guy going for a loose ball and then getting his stick wrapped up in the player's legs or anything like that. Usually it's going to come from, an attempt to do a stick check and just kind of drawing up the guy's legs. It could be, with the feet, but it's got to be a positive primary action. It's pretty obvious. It's pretty big. Okay. It doesn't have to be intentional. And all that. It can happen when the feet get tangled. Now, the question you want to ask yourself is, would that player have gone down without the help? And that's going to be important. And a lot of times what a lot of people call trips might just be a hold, and a lot of times, when you throw that flag for the trip, you may downgrade those to holds, depending on how bad they look and how much the player was put in danger. If two guys are going for a ground ball, and then as the guy who gets the ground ball is getting out, the stick gets caught between the legs and it takes him to the ground, we're just going to call that a hold because it wasn't the positive primary action. The primary action was trying to get the loose ball. Okay. If a guy is going for a loose ball and the other player trips over his stick, that's not a foul. That's not a trip or a hold. All right. So does that all kind of make sense? So here, this will be a good example.
Congratulations. We thank everyone who participated. Roll on.
So the player in white, he's, actually just kind of peppering the guy with a couple legal checks, but he gets down on his thigh.
Congratulations. We thank everyone who participated. Roll on.
We got two good ones on the hand that were totally legal.
Is
And then the third one caught him right, kind of a little bit below the hip on the thigh and brought him down. That's a trip. All right. The next one. Unnecessary.
congratulations.
All right. And this is kind of a catch-all, and it'll cover a lot of different things. So it's excessively violent holding and pushing infractions. So they may look, it might be a, perfect, looks good, but it was excessively violent. It was unnecessary. When we talk about legal pushes and holds, usually the object is to get the player to lose the ball, right? And there's a certain amount of force that you can use to do that. Anything beyond that was unnecessary. They didn't have to do that. So that's why it's called unnecessary roughness. Defensive player with violent contact with a screening opponent. So you'll see the guy sets a pick, and as the defensive player's going by, he just unloads on him. He might hit him right in the chest. He might have his hands together, but he just took him and dumped him because he set a pick. That would be an example of unnecessary roughness. Avoidable, deliberate, violent contact. Okay. And then anything with a punching blow. So, when you body check, you're kind of bringing your body into the player. All right. And your hands. But if I stand here and I just wail on you like that, that's going to be unnecessary roughness. You're using that kind of force to do that. And probably one of the most common, and it would be the avoidable, deliberate, violent contact, are late hits. And when we get into mechanics and we talk about the role of the off-ball official, that's what we're looking for. We're looking for the guy who takes advantage of a player after he passes or shoots the ball, and gives them a little bit extra. And if it's too late and it's too hard, we got to call it unnecessary roughness, or we're going to have problems. All right, so let's look at an example. Okay, so coming around inside, that guy just unloads on him. He's not going to beat him there. It's a step or two after he shoots, and he had no intention of just laying that guy out. Okay, and then also, you don't really see what happened. But again, if I'm the official there, I'm not strolling in. I'm running in and getting in the middle of that. And we probably have, and we'll talk in a minute about the behavior foul. We probably have a second foul. All right. You see the guy with the little over top of him and the fist bump. Okay. So I think if I'm on that crew, I'm probably going to chuck another flag on that player for the taunt. And I think too, if you look at what happened, in the video, after he does that, the player's on the ground, teammate gives him a shove. If you don't have that flag is a way to stop everybody and get them out of there. You could end up with a more serious problem. So, not sure what this black slide is for. All right. So any questions about the illegal contact fouls? In better higher level games, they're very obvious. Any of these are in lower level games, they're there more, but sometimes it kind of looks like part of the play. So as a referee, we have to set our bar and make sure that these big personal illegal contact fouls are taken care of. So the next category is illegal conduct. So it's behavior. So unsportsmanlike conduct, remember we talked about the latter when we talked about the conduct foul, where we can warn them, we can take the ball, We can put them in for 30 seconds on a conduct foul. And then, we could hit them with a 1 minute unsportsmanlike. And then the final step would, be the death penalty or the ejection, and hopefully at some point in that ladder, the person, the person gets it and the behavior stops. Any fighting should be an automatic ejection. And that's a 3 minute penalty that is served by the in-home, because the fighting party has to leave the facility. Fighting includes any throwing a punch, participating in a fight. It also includes any player, even on-field player, going in and getting involved in that fight. And it could even be, their intention could have been to try to break the fight up. But, if they run into that fight or that pile, they're subject to being a part of that fight. And they're subject to ejection. And we'll talk when we start the regular season meetings. We'll do some talk about what to do during fights. The only coaches allowed on the field during a fight are only the head coaches. The assistant coaches should not be out there breaking up fights, touching players, doing anything like that. And the head coach should only be touching his own player in an effort to stop a fight. So that's that. When we talk about, especially this kind of unsportsmanlike conduct, we are talking about, particularly, just excessive questioning your call, questioning your judgment, questioning your integrity, language, those kind of things. Anything they do to show you up, or anything like that, is part of that coach's behavior, and we want to use the latter. When it comes to addressing any coaching behavior, you don't want to ignore the head coach. So if there's a problem and he's upset, you want to try to deal with that as best you can. Okay. Ignoring that coach is just going to make the problem worse. Okay. With that said, you always want to answer a question, not a statement. So if the guy's yelling at you about the call you just made, say, Coach, do you have a question? I'll answer any questions you have right now. And a lot of times, it'll be, well, didn't you have a push? No, I didn't have a push. At some point, and it's got to be fairly quickly because you don't want to disrupt the flow of the game. You've got to finally just say, Coach, it's over. We're done with that. We can move. We got to move on. We got to play the game. We can discuss this later. We can discuss it in our post-game reporting, but we're done. And then the third part of coaching behavior too is sometimes just being honest with the coach. You don't want to do it all the time, but say, hey, Coach, I had a different perspective than you. I understand, maybe you saw something I didn't see. I'll look at the tape. I'd love to know. And if I'm wrong, I'll tell you I'm wrong. Or occasionally, Coach, I think you might be right. I might have missed that, and a lot of times that just goes a long way to getting the game moving and fixing that kind of behavior. So, but you do have to draw that line with coaches as to what you're going to accept. And cursing at you, questioning your integrity, talking about your wife or anything like that, totally unacceptable and should be penalized. All right, player behavior. You set the tone for player behavior early. If you allow a lot of stuff to go on, it's going to go on, it's going to continue, and it's going to get worse. So you want to control player to player interactions. And this is where, and I'm sure, we either have coaches or officials of other sports here. You kind of know when things are going to get a little bit out of control. And you want to get in the middle and you want to stop that kind of talk. You want to stop those kind of interactions. And hopefully sometimes if you just tell them to stop, you can, it'll stop and you don't even have to penalize it. Okay. So any kind of trash talking, any kind of bad language, we got to address immediately. But as long as you get involved, it will usually stop. The big thing now we really have to watch for is race and gender. Okay. Anything where you're hearing things about race and gender, you have to stop immediately. And if the players or the coaches tell you it's going on, you need to get that stopped immediately. And if you do hear a comment about, a person's race or a person's gender, in a negative light, that's not something you can pass and just tell them to stop. You have to stop that immediately, with a flag. So, and these are all things we'll talk more and more about. Just a point, if this guy gets involved, you got problems. So do you guys know who that is? Have you ever seen him? That's the guy, Greg Gorelian, the face-off guy. He's a monster. So you want him on your side. Team behavior. Use your captains to diffuse situations. They're your leaders. When you give a warning about language, when you give a warning about a post-game celebration, you give a warning about anything, they're team warnings. Make sure everybody knows you've given that warning. Okay. Some other personal fouls that we didn't talk about. Illegal crossing equipment. Okay. So the gloves, when you check the gloves, the front of the glove has to completely cover the hands. They can tape up holes or rips or tears, but they can't cut. A lot of them try to cut the inside of their gloves out to give them a better feel, particularly your tackman. They have to completely cover. Mouthpiece, any mouthpiece violations, a technical foul. And then a couple other things are grabbing the ball or opponent's cross on a face-off. So if you see a face-off player, reach out and grab the ball, or reach out and hold the stick with his fingers, that is a unsportsmanlike, and that'd be 1 minute. We'll go into more about sticks, illegal crossing equipment, and how we enforce that later. We do some during the regular season. We do some stick checks, and coaches can always ask for a stick check. So penalty enforcement. We'll go into more of this next week, but just most of this review. Personal fouls can be 1, 2, or 3 minutes at your discretion. After the end of periods, you can still have these kind of penalties, and there's different things we have to do when the period ends. Determining if a penalty is releasable or non-releasable. There is a fouling out in lacrosse. So if you incur 5 minutes of personal foul time, not technical foul time, but personal foul time, you foul out, you're just disqualified from getting back in the game. It's not an ejection. And then, we do have ejections, and those players have to leave the facility, players and coaches. So preventing some fouls. A big part of this is your pregame communication with captains. Also, sometimes, like in the summer and the fall, you don't see the captains, but you can figure out who the leaders are. They can be your friends. I always tell the captains, if they handle any problems before I have to, it goes much better. It's okay for those captains to ask questions. It's okay for you to ask questions of them. It's not okay for them to yell and scream at you. And it's also not okay for you to yell and scream at them. Everything's got to be done civilly. In-game communication with players. When you have a second, it's okay to explain to a player what they did wrong so they don't do it again. A lot of times I'll see a guy with the cross-check hold and it's close to a cross-check. I'll tell him, just put your hands together, or else you're going to end up probably getting a penalty. let them know. If they're civil with you, you can tell them. Beware of flashpoints. Anytime after goals, one of our officials will signal the goal, the other official or officials should be watching. Bad things sometimes happen after goals. Players tend to come together. That's when they tend to get talking. That's when, you get a lot of trash talk and a lot of crap. Anything around the crease, things just seem to escalate when it gets close to the crease. So when you have a lot of crease play, you really got to watch what's going on. When you do make that call for a guy in the crease or goalie interference, have your eyes up, make sure nothing extra is going to happen. Anytime players are moving. So after goals, timeouts, end of quarters, when players are moving and crossing, you want to just, keep an eye on that before you tend to anything else. If you can, kind of watch what's going on in the substitution box. The best thing to do is keep that box clear. And we'll talk more about that a little bit in the spring. And then anytime you have that big hit, even that big legal hit, everybody should tune their radar up and really keep an eye on what's going on. Because somebody, another player might take exception to that hit and feel like they can go back and fix it. And then right along with that is just situational awareness. You guys have refereed, you guys have coached. You can tell when things are starting to pick up. I get a sense, and sometimes, you start to feel that momentum shift or the excitement go way up. Sometimes you might want to find something, to call to slow things down or make sure you catch something that happens. Anytime you have big, long, loose ball scrums, we want to kind of kill those as quick as we can. That's where you do maybe get a little more picky and find a foul, because bad things happen in those scrums. Always watch the first 5 minutes. And a lot of times the first 5 minutes, the second half, if a coach or a captain particularly cranked everybody up, something bad could happen. You just want to make sure you're awake for it. Again, big hits, the crowd, and anything going on between the lines. When you get a ball going on, loose ball near the lines, you really got to wake up and open up your field of view. So with that, that's the end of what I have for today. Let me end my share. Does anybody have any questions about the personal fouls? Okay. I think it's pretty self-explanatory, and again, our primary job is the safety of players. I'll always tell you, and most of our senior officials will always tell you, when it comes to these safety fouls, particularly the big hits and anything close to the head, you're better erring on the side of caution, than passing. And as you referee the sport more and more, you'll learn what you should tolerate in certain situations and what you shouldn't. So. All right. So I will, in the next day or two, I'll send out an email to get everybody set up for our on-field training. I'll send out this recording and I'll send out a couple of those Kahoot little quizzes. They'll be particularly for people who are going to watch the video, who weren't able to make the meeting for whatever reason, but feel free to go through those. They'll kind of help you cover the rules and start to understand. And that's what I got. Anybody got anything? All right. Well, that's not bad. I did it in 100 minutes instead of 90. So my goal is always to get it done in 90 minutes. So I'll stick around here for a few minutes if anybody has questions or wants to talk, but other than that, I will see you this same link and everything next Wednesday, and then be ready for the following weekend. Thanks for coming. We're excited to have you all.
Thanks, Greg.
Thank you.